introduction to the food security simulator, which is a micro simulation tool, as we discussed earlier, that IFPRI developed to track and analyze food security patterns in response to economic change or shocks. We are very pleased to have Andrew Comstock online to introduce this tool to us. Andrew, thank you very much.
Yes. Can you hear me? Just making sure one last time.
Yes. Yes.
All right, excellent. And I'm going to take over the screen really fast. And all right. Thank you everyone for coming. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning for some of us. My name is Andrew Comstock. I'm a senior research analyst in the Foresight and Policy Modeling Unit at IFPRI based in Washington, D.C. And today I'm going to be presenting, well, not just presenting, soft launching the Food Security Simulator Ethiopia. This is the first time we're presenting this officially, where we're officially soft launching it today. There'll be a full launch at a later event that I'll explain further on in the presentation. And I just wanted to give you a quick outline of what I'm going to be doing in the presentation. I'm going to spend the first bit going through some slides, just providing some motivation and background of the tool and how the tool works. Then I'm going to get out of the PowerPoint and actually get into the tool, give you some real world examples of how the tool works, because it works just that quickly. And at the end, we'll stop for my favorite part, which is the questions and answers, because I love getting questions about this. I love talking about it. So let's get started. So what is the motivation and purpose of the food security simulator? Well, as we've all seen, food security in many countries has been impacted by a succession of recent crises, and it feels like they're getting more and more common. This can be the COVID shock, obviously. This could be the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which had a massive impact on global food prices. This can be climate change. It can be a local shock, it can be a global shock, but there's a lot more shocks that seem to be happening in the world. When these shocks hit unexpectedly, that's the policymakers need to be able to take quick action. That's when it's most important to be able to have a rapid assessment tool that works quickly and efficiently at analyzing the impact of the shock. That's where the food security simulator comes in. It's an innovative tool that being used for first cut evaluations of these shocks on direct household level outcomes in a timely manner. So what does that mean? That means when a shock happens, a policymaker, a researcher, an analyst, anybody who's interested can immediately open up this tool, input the shocks, and get quick results for the impact that shock will have on food security outcomes without having to develop some complex tool or something like that. Now, importantly, the food security simulator is designed for assessing the short-term impacts of these shocks. We allow the users to input food price or income changes, and actually brand new with the Ethiopia tools, we allow food preference changes. And then we look at the short-term impact on dietary quality, food security indicators, and a few different others. We have a large suite of outcomes. What this means is that it is not a CGE model. It doesn't look at how the shock is impacting other areas of the economy. We're very much focused on household food consumption. And it's not a recursive model. It doesn't work over different time periods. It's really designed to be a quick and efficient tool to look at how these shocks affect the immediate aftermath of household food security. We do allow the user to look at different population subgroups. It depends on the representativeness of the survey we're using, which I'll get into, but right now we look at rural, urban, and different quintiles. What are the features of the tool? Well, I've previewed them a little bit already, but the whole point of the tool is that it's easy to use. It's based in Excel. You don't have to download Stata. You don't have to install games. You don't even have to have a very powerful machine. The idea is that this tool travels very quickly. It works in Microsoft Office. It's based in Excel, and you can use it and share it widely. That said, it's easy to use, but it also provides detailed simulation results. We've backed up this tool using a lot of rigorous research, including sophisticated food demands, specifically food demand models, excuse me. Specifically, we use a quadratic almost ideal demand system that Olivia, my research partner, Olivia Ecker, and I have been using for many years and refining over a long period of time. There are some publications here if you're interested in how those work. And we use some innovative, output indicators such as the RED, which is the Reference Diet Deprivation Index, to help us understand household diet diversity. So you can take this simple, easy to use Excel model, you input the shocks that you want, and it's backed up with this rigorous research, and then you get these lovely graphs and indicator results. We have formatted tables, graphs, other things that translate this ease of use, ease of output into very, very nice and pretty outputs. We're currently using the most recent representative household survey data we could get our hands on for Ethiopia, which is the ESS4. That's what we're doing in Ethiopia. This work was originally piloted in Kenya and then expanded in Nigeria and now Ethiopia. But importantly, this tool is very flexible. So if we ever wanted to or got our hands on some new and updated data, we could very quickly update the baseline data to reflect the current situation. But right now we have a locked data set that works in the background of the Excel. So the user does not interact with the data set at all. The user interacts with the shocks. And we lock the data set in the background, and it can be easily updated whenever we get access to new data, but currently we're using the SS4. All right, let's move on to using the food security simulator, the everyone's favorite part. As I mentioned, the user has 3 places where they can input changes. We have price shocks, we have income shocks, and we have income preference changes. Again, brand new to the Ethiopia version of the food security simulator. The price shocks are completely inputted by the user. They don't need to do anything else after doing that. Once you input this, right here, I have an example of grain prices increasing by 20%. Once you input those numbers, the food security simulator does everything else. You don't have to press go. You don't have to do any math. You don't have to do any thinking beyond that. You just input the price shocks, the income shocks, and you go about your way. Importantly to note, and I've gotten this question a number of times, these shocks can be combined in any number of ways. I've shocked only grains on the far left, but you could shock any combination of these items by rural and urban, however to your heart's content. You could shock incomes to your heart content. And we now allow users to change income preference changes. What does this mean? Well, the real meat and potatoes of the food security simulator are some very elaborately calculated food demand elasticities. This is where the Quaid's model comes in. So we take the shocks that you're inputting, we run them through these elasticities, and then we get outputs. So it's more complicated than that, but that's the gist of it. Well, now, rather than making you stick with the elasticities we've calculated, we allow you to change the income preferences of the end user. Why have we done this? Well, we got a lot of feedback saying that, preferences aren't stable over time. A shock may change people's preferences. So now we let you do that. I have an abbreviated version of the table here, but we allow you to do it for all of the food groups by poor, non-poor, rural, and urban. Now, another question I frequently get that's important to mention here is the tool is completely agnostic to where the shocks come from. The tool will not tell you what shocks to use. The tool will not tell you how to input the shocks. The point of this is to be very, very flexible. So you come to the tool with the simulation that you want to try out. Maybe you got some data from the inflation statistics of the national government, or maybe you just have a hunch that that NSET prices are about to go up by 10%. Doesn't matter. You go to the tool, and in seconds you'll have the result that you're looking for. What are the results? Well, here's what the outputs look like. So as I mentioned, we provided a lot of different formatted tables and graphs. Here's just 2 quick examples. The table on the left provides the simulated changes from the baseline for a variety of different statistics, and the table on the graph on the right is showing one of the many graphs that we produce showing the simulated impact on diet on consumption deficit gaps in reference to the Eat Lancet diet. Again, these are produced automatically by the tool. It doesn't require any extra work by the end user. And you get these very nice outputs, with the whole point being that you can do some quick shocks, take these outputs and immediately create a PowerPoint. You can immediately create a policy brief. You can immediately just create a quick email to send to somebody who's interested in what these outputs are. Now, importantly, it's not limited to this. We have other indicators, and much more detailed breakdowns of the indicators are provided. I won't be going through those today due to my limited time, but for those interested, they can download and look at some more significant disaggregations of the output. Now, how do you get this thing? Well, I'm proud to announce that as of yesterday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, it is now officially available for download from the Harvard Dataverse. That's why you can see right there, it currently has 0 downloads when I looked at it yesterday. But if you search for Food Security Simulator IFPRI or Food Security Simulator Ethiopia, you can find it either on the Harvard Dataverse or go to the IFPRI page, and there's a link for the food security simulator Ethiopia now where the red arrow is. Wasn't up when I took this screenshot, but it is now there. I have confirmed this morning, so you can go after I finish this presentation or while I'm giving the presentation, you can go and download the tool and have and play around with it. Important to note, and you see this at the bottom, I say save both files in the same folder. The food security simulator is broken up into two separate files. One is the tool itself, which has the user inputs and all of the detailed statistical breakdowns, and it also has the data set locked in the background. The second file is the results overview file, and this provides the nice pretty graphs and tables. We had to separate them in order to make it less of a burdensome Excel file and make it run smoother. But what this means is that when you download it, the links will remain linked if you save them in the same folder. If you accidentally save them in different folders, it'll break and you'll have to re-download it. But the links will automatically update together if you save them in the same folder. A little brief history of the food security simulator. We first launched the food security simulator in Kenya in June of 2023 with our partners at IFPRI. They were the ones who originally helped us develop the tool. We then expanded to Nigeria later in that year, and my colleague Olivier presented it there. And just yesterday, we finally published our first blog on the tool itself, which incorporates all three of the tools and looks at the impact of some recent crises on food security in Kenya, Nigeria, and Ethiopia. Now, let's get to the good stuff. Let's look at the tool. So I'm going to take you over to the first file, and I'm just going to walk you through. So first things first, we are now in the food security simulator tool. In this tool, we will provide you a very detailed breakdown of how the tool works, some background, some of which I've already went over, some descriptions of the sheets, and for those interested, some more detailed information about the methods. I've kind of skipped over that for now. In my longer, I have another presentation slide deck that lasts an hour where I go through these in much more detail, but we don't have the time for that today. And in this tool, this is where you can find the input sheets. We have our price shocks, our income shocks, and our preference changes. You can see this table is very long and very detailed. And for those interested, we have some of our more detailed disaggregated tables for diet quality and food consumption. Let's go back to the food shocks. Now we have a results overview worksheet. This one automatically updates when we change any results in the other file. We have our tables. Importantly, we do provide baseline information here, so you know what the baseline data looks like inside of the ESS form after we've done some calculations, and our change from baseline. You'll see we don't have any shocks inputted right now, so everything is 0 as it should be for the change from baseline. We provide graphs that look at the consumption deficit percentage based on, and so this is by Eat Lancet food group, and graphs by decile, how big of a deficit gap there is for households for how close they should be and how far away they are from their Eat Lancet diet. We provide the same relative information in a bar chart, household food poverty graphs, and undernourishment graphs. All well and good. So, just checking my time. Let's go through at least one example here, as I went a little bit longer doing that, where we're going to look at what would happen if we increase grain prices by 30%. Now, you might say 30%, that's a lot. Well, 30% based on some recent research by Shinshin Zhao and Channing Art at IFPRI is the average increase in grain price in Africa caused by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So, again, this is an illustrative example. It's certainly the results would have been more disaggregated than a blank 30% change to all grain prices in rural and urban areas. But the whole point of this is just to show you what happens and how easy it is to use. So I've entered 30 in all of it. It's now shown us that the price shocks are going up. This is increasing food prices. So let's see what happens when we go to the results table. We can see that we've now automatically produced results. Before these were zeros. Now we have many, many different results. And we can see that as a result of the 30% increase in grain prices, we would expect food poverty to increase by 4% and prevalence of undernourishment to increase by 10%. That's a lot. We should be very worried if undernourishment is increasing by 10% from one shock. Again, this is an illustrative example, but it also shows the importance of really thinking more deeply about how these shocks affect food poverty and undernourishment. Grains, while they're very important for providing calories, aren't as important for defining food poverty as they're a very cheap source of calories. So this gives us a good way of looking at the difference between food poverty and undernourishment and how they're affected differently by different shocks. We also have breakdowns by quintile, so we can see the difference in effects for rural poor and urban poor. And then we also have results for our diet quality indicators. So the diet quality indicator, as mentioned before, is this red index, which you can find more information on in some of the links provided in the tool. So we can see that even though grains are not typically thought of as providing a benefit to dietary quality, they still are important. You still need grains. The Eat Lancet diet still calls for about 800 kcals of starchy staples per person per day. So this massive change to grain prices still has a deleterious effect on diet quality, not as much as prevalence of undernourishment, but it's still not good. And we can even see that down here, here, that it even reduces the number of average adequate food groups in the very poor households by a large margin, especially in rural areas. What is this telling us? That it's saying that a 30% shock to grain prices is knocking some rural households completely out of consuming grains, which is just not a great situation to be in. And you can understand now that we can look at this very quickly. We didn't have to build a Stata model. We didn't have to build a games model. We didn't have to install any fancy software. We read a paper, we saw that there was going to be this big shock, and we immediately were able to look at it. If we wanted to test other shocks, you could very easily, you saw how quickly this works. You could go from 5 to 10, 15, 20, 25, take the tables, graph it. You can make all sorts of interesting outputs from this. And finally, so we'll look at the consumption graphs. And so as mentioned, this is showing the simulated impact of the shock on consumption deficit gaps. And we can see that we went from most households being somewhat, what's the word I'm looking for? Consuming enough starchy staples. We've pushed this inwards, which is meaning that now more households are becoming more and more deficit in starchy staples. What else do we see? Well, we can see that some households now actually move to consuming more fruit. So there's some sort of substitution effects there, but they're also being pushed out of dairy foods, out of protein foods, and out of added fats, dramatically so. And this is important to remember in terms of using this tool to understand diet quality and food security. You may have thought that the grain shock was simply pushing people out of consuming grains. But we look at all the cross-price elasticities. We look at these cross-price effects, and we allow you to understand how a shock to one portion of the demand system, of the food demand system, will affect the results for the other parts of the food demand system. I wanted to leave 10 minutes for Q&A, so why don't I just show one more very brief example of a positive shock, and then we'll go over to the Q&A. So to reset, we can just change this to 0 again. And now let's just happen to say that there's some kind of government transfer program. We want to increase poor incomes through a transfer of goods, a transfer of money, a subsidy of some kind. We can increase, let's say we're going to increase poor household incomes by 15%. Again, the tool is completely agnostic as to where these shocks come from. They just happen, but that's part of the appeal is the flexibility. So now we have a green arrow because this is something that we would consider good. And we can come back and look at the effect on food poverty. We can see we have a relative, modest effect on reducing food poverty, not so much on reducing the prevalence of undernourishment. This is largely driven by urban areas, but also rural areas. And what that can tell us, as based on the previous results, is, these income effects might not have a strong effect as some of the price effects. To really juice the income effect, you really need to think about how large of a transfer you're going to be doing. But for average adequate food groups, we can see that for poor rural households, this 15% increase in incomes has had a wonderfully big effect at increasing food groups. So if we're trying to target a policy directly at improving the number of food groups that poor households are consuming, this would be a very good idea. Now, like I said, I wanted to leave quite some time for Q&A, so I will stop there, stop sharing my screen, and send it back to y'all.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for a very clear and detailed description and introduction to the food security simulator. I now invite participants to raise questions, suggestions based on the presentation. Namakul.
Maybe some clarification, because I'm not sure if I just missed the information. Have you looked at doing a retrospective analysis as part of the testing of the tool to see how accurate it was in predicting what the shocks would actually do? Thank you.
Yes. To answer the question briefly, I have a brief answer. We did so in Nigeria where we first piloted the tool, but we have not done so in Ethiopia. But it would be worth doing in Ethiopia as well. So the question is both yes and no. Or the answer.
Thanks. So it is in your plans to.
Yes. Well, it should be now. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. Salamite.
It is a kind of suggestion and advice. In Ethiopian context, usually the government of Ethiopia depends on its own sources, especially with respect to shocks. So I think in the future, it is very important to engage people from the Ministry of Agriculture, Ethiopian Disaster Risk Commission, and also from the Meteorology Agency and others who are working on those areas, because some of the decisions when sometimes shock happens are done by the political leaders. So it is very important to engage them actively. And my other suggestion is the source of data. You know, people may ask, is it a remote sense? Are you dependent on the remote sensing, or like, do you have pilot areas like Meteorology Agency in different parts of Ethiopia to collect the data and also analyze and inform the public? These are the two suggestions from my part. Thank you so much.
Let me chime in very quickly. So I didn't make it clear enough in my presentation. We're solely based on household surveys. So we work out of household consumption and expenditure modules, and so we're not doing remote sensing. It's not based on agricultural data. It's based on these large. We usually need at least 10,000 households to make the subsample of the correct size. So anytime we get a new survey like that, we can update the tool, even if based on what level of representativeness it has. To your first point, yeah, great, absolutely. We would love to be in the hands of policymakers to help them inform, to make better decisions. That's part of the reason that we developed this tool, is that it's easy to approach and easy to use. So even someone, let's say a political who doesn't have STATA or GAMS on their computer, can immediately download this tool and just start inputting shocks and start thinking about how these shocks would affect household food security.
Thanks. Maybe just to add a clarification, Andrew and team ultimately intend to provide this tool to users in these respective countries, to the right agency, like in Ethiopia, for instance, such that it can be used by them, and with the regular update coming from the team as new information, new techniques emerge. So ultimately, it is the local,
Yes.
yeah.
This might actually be a good time to jump in and promote that I will be coming to Ethiopia sometime in January to do a full day training on the tool, where we hope to invite these exact kind of people to come and learn how to use the tool, learn it in much more detail. I'll be providing guided examples and then guidance on some independent work and some other things. But we haven't nailed down the dates, but sometime in mid to late January, I'll be coming to do a full workshop. So keep your eyes open for an invitation and an agenda.
Yeah, that will happen for sure. Any more questions?
I think we received a question online. I can answer real quick. It's a good one that
So-
I actually got in my last presentation in Nigeria, which is how do we decide on the baseline prices for the price shocks? Because as some astute observers might have noticed that these household surveys don't often collect price data for these items. So we have to impute a price using a unit value. And these aren't always it's not always a direct one-to-one comparison, a unit value for a price, but we put in a lot of work to make sure that they're as good as they can possibly be. So we take the price and expenditure observed in the household survey data, we construct a unit value, and then through a series of regional aggregations and some outlier cleaning and a variety of other things that we've developed over 5-6 years of doing this kind of work, we arrive at a final spatial median unit value that we're pretty confident accurately reflects the price of the good in that area.
Yeah, that's actually a great question and a great answer. Perhaps as a research topic, as Andrew, you know, one of the issues is unit values is accounting for quality. So maybe
Yes,
maybe in the future, looking at those techniques that Deaton and others tried.
We've looked at those before and we've incorporated them in some respects, but we also feel that the regional aggregation makes a big difference for you know, the quality does tend to vary pretty significantly by region is one of the area, and we get as very low down as we can to account for that. But anyway, that's a whole different that's a whole different
Yes,
seminar.
exactly. But this is fine. This is a pretty it is working pretty well. So that's fine. Any other question? Yes, Ode.
Yeah, my question is related to the, we have been struggling with, having a digital tool to be implemented. And one of the problems we face at a national level is the capacity, infrastructure, as well as human resources. Are you going to, being supporting them over time, or how do you hand over to the national program?
Great question, and a similar question I got from Nigeria as well. So I'll answer it in two parts. The first part is the optimistic part, and that's that I want this tool to be used and useful. I've put a lot of effort into building the structure of this tool, and I want people to use it. And to that end, I encourage everybody to download the tool, use the tool. If you have feedback, send it to me. I have an email address that's publicly available on IFPRI. Send it to the Ethiopia office, they'll find me. If you have questions on how to use the tool, on ways to improve it, on ways to get it into more people's hands, please talk to me. I want people to use this as much as possible. I've put a lot of effort into it. And on top, and then the next stage would be come to the training, where I would love to see as many smiling faces there and talk to people and get people using the tool. The second part is, as I mentioned, the tool is able to be updated, but it's locked and I have the password, and so I am the one who would update it. So going forward, if we get new data, if somebody wants to do a regional disaggregation using the food security simulator and has representative data that they want to do, we can do that. But but that would be a dialogue that we would have to have about what your needs are and what kind of data we have.
And so the gist of the answer is that there would be continued update, continued support, and
Yes.
regular interaction going forward. Okay, it is time. Perhaps Andrew should have some breakfast.
Oh no, I have 2 young children, so I've been up for a while.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you.
We look forward to your visit in January, and
Yes,
I'm
I
sure
look
there
forward to
will be
coming.
a large number of people looking forward to the same. Thanks again on behalf of the participants here. See you.
Thank you.